Hello and welcome back to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown and I'm the editor at Guns on Pegs. In a return to our usual programming, once again I'm joined by the CEO of ITAP Group, Chris Horn. Hi Chris.
George, how are we doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. What did you think of our Morocco episode? Were you jealous?
What do you think? I didn't know anything about this until I heard a podcast, and I was like, right. It sounded like epic fun.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, amazing. Really good fun. Yeah. But it's been a busy old time since then, hasn't it?
It has. It's rather chaotic at the moment. All good though. We're getting closer. 12th of June. So our census goes out. The game shooting census, which we do every year, that goes out this week. So for me, that's always like we do that at the time when people are really in the like peak of planning, as in like most of the planning's done. We can capture what's going to happen for this coming season, and that's exciting because it means it's just around the corner, and it is really just around the corner. And it feels weird saying that.
Yeah, I know. Middle of June. I can't quite believe it. I'm excited because I'm going fishing tonight. That's going to be very fun. Fishing a chalk stream for the first time this year.
Oh, where are you off to?
Just a stretch of the Test, just outside Stockbridge. So absolutely prime water. I've been getting reports all day from the rest of my family who are already down there.
In like 34-degree heat or whatever we've got outside of the back door at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. They've been sweating all day, and I think I'm going to turn up at just the right time when it starts cooling down and the fish start rising.
Dreamy.
Yeah. Right, Chris, enough of my boasting. Why don't you introduce our guest?
Sure. So our guest today is probably best known for getting his top off on telly. We can debate that one in a second. He actually appeared on Love Island a few years ago. Because he loves shooting so much, there was no way he was going to keep that out of the press. He's a regular on Fieldsports channel. I'm sure a number of you would have seen him. And he also, his family own the Lanhydrock estate down in Cornwall, where they have game shoot. So a really interesting chap to talk to. Lots to talk about. A huge warm welcome to Ollie Williams.
Hello to you both. Now, you've already given me grief about getting my top off, but George is currently wearing a vest in which looks like his attic. So let's not let that one slide, please, before we start.
Well, yeah, the good news is this is an audio podcast, so nobody else has to see it.
Oh,
it's all quite pink. It's all quite pink as well after the weekend.
The ladies are missing out. Honestly, they are.
George's dress code means that it's impossible to ever share it on YouTube. People ask, why don't you put them on YouTube? It turns out there's the reason.
Yeah,
it's actually probably his most clothed he's been in many episodes, I've been told. So yeah,
it's exactly true. So Ollie, when we first started setting this up, when we first asked you to come on, you said that you were playing midwife to a Labrador.
Yes.
How are the pups?
They are. If you've not already heard them, they're just about that age now. They're 4 weeks old. So they're just the age where I actually came down this morning into the kitchen and they were just all over the place. So they all escaped out of the whelping box and they were causing absolute chaos. So yeah, they are very, very cuddly, very fun. And she only had 2, bless her.
Really?
Yeah. I know. It's just. So I took her to the vet. I was a bit concerned that there was a small litter, but the vet was like, no, they're both healthy and. She's very, very racy as a lab. She's very fit. So the vet said that might have contributed towards it, as well as the fact that it's her first litter. So, yeah, there were just 2 of them running around causing chaos. But, yeah, they're both happy and healthy, and I'm planning to keep one. So,
oh, lovely. It's very a good age that this is the age they learn to walk and they just run backwards into everything. I remember.
Yeah, they start to develop a personality as well. They do, before they're just little bundles of just fur and whiskers, but now they're starting to develop a personality, which is nice. So, it's starting to be a bit more enjoyable to look after them. Aside from all the poo and wee, of course, that they're depositing around the place.
Have you offloaded the other dog? Have you got any takers for it?
Sort of. So a good friend of mine who takes a couple of days with us down at Lanhydrock, he said, "Yep, I'm interested." And I said, "Oh, there, so sent him all the details as well. But let me ask the wife first." So I suspect he may come back and say no. But said, next time maybe ask your wife before you say you want the puppy. But I think he might take it. So.
Taking a puppy without checking with your wife is up there with the bravest decision anyone would make.
Yeah, like booking a tea time. Wrong time of day, it can get quite messy.
I half expect to come home and find a puppy that my wife has acquired from somewhere. She's almost more enthusiastic than me.
Yeah, it doesn't work the other way around, by the way.
Well, no, because there's no, it's your wife's rule is law, isn't it?
Correct.
My fiancée is sitting across the table from me here, so I need to be a little bit careful what I say. I know she's leaving the room. No, never mind. She's out.
Good. Right. I think we'll press on. Ollie, what's that you're drinking?
So, based on the fact that you booked this on a Monday afternoon and middle of silage season, I've sort of jumped out the tractor for the podcast to come and talk to you both. So it's currently bale trailer and tractor in the yard. So unfortunately, it would have been an alcoholic drink, of course, and it would have been a dark and stormy, which is a rum and ginger beer, which is
it's a serious drink.
Yeah, I sort of grew up with a drink sailing. I didn't, well, obviously over the age of 18, of course, but grew up with a drink sailing, and then the Goslings brought out these fantastic little tinnies, which are basically. I'm not convinced it's just alcohol in there. You have one and it does sort of send you in all sorts of different directions, but they're fantastic. So it would have been that, but unfortunately, it's just your average cup of tea. So
we can't condone driving a tractor after a dark and stormy, so that's fine.
Well, many would, but it's not a wise decision, I wouldn't have thought. No, so tea, obviously, you can't have a day shooting, I don't think, almost without a cup of tea, whether it's in the morning or, if it's a slightly more sedate day in the afternoon after the day shooting. So, yeah, I thought a tea was the most appropriate drink in the circumstances, talking to you guys.
I think my love of a tea in the afternoon, I think a large part of it comes from shooting. It's that associational drink of like, that's when you have it, and I think then it starts to stick. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and it's also, it's hard to sort of put yourself in that situation at the moment when it's 30 degrees outside. But particularly when it's been a cold, wet day, and you get back in the warm, and there's a fire going, and there's a great big cake on the table and a big pot of tea. There's few things better, actually.
But also, even in being very English here, even in boiling hot weather, it's still refreshing. It's still, it still hits the spot. You can be out, and working or whatever all day, come in and a cup of tea, and even in 30 degree heat, I still think it hits the spot.
I shall absolutely go try it after this one.
There's a reason cricket matches stop for tea.
Yeah, well, of course. But they've only just restarted, cricket teas. Because I've just started playing cricket with Digby, actually, at Beconnach. And I haven't played cricket for 4 or 5 years, and now I've sort of realised my rugby days are perhaps behind me, so replacing it with cricket. And this is the first year they've brought teas back after COVID, because obviously, that was finger food, and that was far too dangerous for people playing cricket. Not the fact they were chucking a ball between each other all day, but yeah. So I've obviously rejoined the cricket sphere at the right time, as teas have been brought back.
Very good.
Cricket at Beconnach's going to get competitive. Digby talks very highly about this. There's a lot that rides on it.
Well, I hate to admit it, but they talk quite highly about Digby as well. I haven't actually seen him play yet. He was in Morocco last week, obviously, gallivanting
Just to
around.
Confirm, we're going to cut that part, right? That's not making it to air.
No, well, I haven't said anything. God, I'd never confess to anything Digby being good at, especially not shooting.
I'm just going to censor it. I'll just beep it out.
Yeah, exactly. Some compliment about Digby, no one needs to hear it.
No, you're right. But Beconnach's about to take a step in the right direction, I think, with some serious powerhouses coming in. Not.
Oh dear. George, what are you drinking?
Well, speaking of drinks that aren't typically associated with warmer weather, Chris, you're a red wine man, aren't you?
Mm.
Yes. So typically, this kind of weather, you might be thinking about rosé or white wine. But I actually think that a nice chilled Beaujolais at this time of year is a nice thing. So that's what I've got. You weren't expecting that, were you?
I absolutely wasn't. I don't know many people that drink chilled Beaujolais anymore.
How deep is your cellar? This time it's got to be about 6 feet under to keep it cool in this weather.
Well, I confess I did just pop it in the fridge for half an hour before we started recording, just to bring it down a bit. And it's very nice. My first experience of it is totally unrelated to shooting. It was when I was living up in London and living with a bunch of idiots. And we spent a very happy afternoon in a pub beer garden drinking the house Beaujolais from ice buckets. Yes, we got through several bottles that afternoon. So every now and again in the summer, I like to have a nice little glass of red.
Has it got enough to it? Or is it a little bit light and weak?
Well, it's a little bit thin, but then that's sort of the point. And I quite like I don't really want to be able to, stab my red wines with a fork. I don't like them too I don't like them too chewy. And I think this will, if I don't finish the bottle during the recording, this will go very nicely on the riverbank afterwards. So I think it'll be just the right thing.
Quite right.
I understand the point. I'd go Burgundy instead of Beaujolais though. Find something lighter over there. But lovely. Oh, on the riverbank, that would be cool. Are you going to take your own little sort of hamper kit just for yourself?
Just for myself. I think my brother might be a bit fed up if I turn up with goodies just for me. But yeah, I've got a nice little. Well, I've got a cool bag that I'll take, and got a bit of cheese and ham and salami and that kind of thing that I'm sure we'll pick at. Assuming that is we're not hauling fish out every 10 seconds, which is
I would expect
unlikely.
Nothing less.
And Chris, what about you? What have you got?
So one of my best mates came round at the weekend. We had the barbecue out, the Weber. He said to me, "I've heard a lot about this barbecue," and I was like, "Oh yeah, you must have heard the ad." And obviously, we play that in each episode. I don't talk about it every episode deliberately. Anyway, he said to me, "I think you need some help with your drinks on the podcast." And I was like, "Oh, how rude!"
Where did you get that idea from?
He said, "I've got you a beer which absolutely cannot be categorized as a supermarket lager." So he swaps some. I don't know what it must be. Oh no, I think he must get feed from this chap for his cows. So anyway, he gave him a load of this beer, and it's the Red Fox Brewery in Coggeshall in Essex, which isn't a million miles from where I grew up.
Hang on, rewind. Who's given cows to who? I'm sorry, you've lost me here.
The guy who owns the brewery, I think, must give some feed.
Oh, so he's not the chap that came round to yours for the barbecue.
No,
your friend.
no,
okay, sorry,
no.
That's where I got confused here. I was like, where are cows getting involved?
I think the chap who owns the brewery gives feed to one of my best mates, and anyway, he's also given him a load of this beer. So Pip has gone and passed it on to me and said, "Have this on the pod because it's not a supermarket lager," which is very good for him. So it's called Coggeshall Gold, and it's really good. Like, I actually love this.
So it's like a golden ale.
Yes, and it's really chilly and perfect for the moment.
Sounds very nice.
Sounds extremely refreshing.
It is. And I've recently gone off lager. I think I had a bit of an incident on a stag do where I got food poisoning, and I just, since that point, have not been able to drink. Yeah, it was just that shitty Spanish stuff. I forget what it is, but
everyone's got a drink. Everyone's got a drink that they've had a horrendous. I mean, maybe when they're really young. I mean, I've certainly had a couple, but there's a couple of drinks that I could name. Foster's being one of them. If I see the stuff, I mean, it makes me gag. It's just horrific. What's the other? Malibu? Yeah, that's a big no-no.
Yeah. Oh God, that was never a drink that anyone liked. It was just a drink they drank.
Yeah, just a drink that, and I didn't obviously wasn't very good at drinking it, so that ended extremely poorly. But yeah, you must have drinks that really bites you back.
Oh, I mean, I can't. Tequila is an absolute non-starter for me. That's an absolute no. And I once got incredibly drunk on kind of homemade Normandy cider, and that wasn't a pleasant experience either.
This wasn't in Digby's cellar, was it? This wasn't in Digby's cellar with that half-grown stuff that we drank at his last year.
Well, I mean, that's quite chewy, isn't it? But no, this was some stuff that we'd brought back from France, and just like there's a sort of wooden sign propped up against someone's gate post as you drive along, says whatever the French for cider for sale is, and
€1 per litre. Fill up yourself.
Exactly, yeah. Fill up the car's petrol tank, and it's kind of, some of it is probably really nice, and some of it is deeply dodgy. So yeah, I won't be doing that again.
Well, now we're all suitably lubricated. George, whose bird is it anyway?
Yes, so Ollie, in case you're not familiar, the first of our listener correspondence segments is called Whose Bird Is It Anyway? And it's where we ask our listeners to send in their shooting dilemmas and queries and quandaries, and we do our level best to help them out. We always keep the correspondent anonymous, so that their identity is protected. And this one comes from somebody I've decided to name Napoleon. And Napoleon writes, pre-COVID, I was asked if I would like to join the beating line of a small local shoot. Shooting 60 to 80 bird days, the shoot was very friendly. All guns, beaters and pickers up would meet for coffee and bacon sandwiches in the shoot host's house before setting off. We had a friendly 11s break all together and a cup of tea and a slice of cake at the end of the day, a brace of pheasants to take home and a gun on beaters day. All pretty normal. I joined knowing that there were no wages for the beaters and was happy to do so. Post-COVID, the host no longer has anyone in for pre- or post-shoot food and drink, which I totally understand. However, one of my beater friends has recently become a full gun and has informed me that he is tapped up for £40 a day for beaters' wages. I've now attended for 4 years and have not been offered a penny in terms of wages, but have realised that some beaters enjoy everything I do, plus receive a small wage to offset their costs. Nobody expects to be paid anything like what their time is worth, but I feel that if one person is paid, all should be paid. Should I say something to the host, or just look to beat at another shoot that treats everybody the same? I enjoy the day, the countryside, the banter, and seeing the dogs work, but it's starting to annoy me that not all are treated equally.
Yikes. Ouch. Yeah, yikes. Should I start?
Go for it.
So, I mean, the first thing is obviously the withdrawal of the hospitality for the team. I mean, that's clearly why they were getting away with not being paid before, which is fair enough because a lot of places do that. It's everyone comes in, is fed, oiled, etc. That being removed, you then have to I suppose at least cover the fuel, and the fact that this has then gone to that stage. I mean, in Napoleon's shoes, I'd probably just say, I've been made aware that other people are being paid and I'm not.
It's really difficult, isn't it? The thing is, though, he's left himself with a should I look elsewhere? Now, if you're going to look elsewhere, you might as well confront it, because if that goes badly, either way, you're off, right? The only question is whether he just wants to avoid confrontation, which is very British. It's not much confrontation. It's just saying, look, I'd love to have my fuel covered, or at least something for this, especially now that we don't have the hospitality. I was just wondering if there were any plans to do that. I think that's quite a polite way of putting it. But he's got to say something.
Are the guns being asked to chip in for the beaters' wages?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the bit I'm not sure I would bring up.
40 quid per gun per day.
Yeah. It's
right.
It's really, really awkward.
Because that's definitely not going to all of the beaters either, unless, I think there's...
Unless there's 9 guns, £40 per gun per beater, and, whatever, they're being passed on to beaters, and there's just more beaters than guns, so some of them don't get paid. That's a fairly brutal way of deciding it.
You're Napoleon, unfortunately, you may not be the best beater there, so perhaps that's why you're not being paid. But, and of course, in their eyes, let me just rephrase.
How about he asks him, what do I have to do to beat better in order to be paid? Just assuming that you get paid more if you get paid if you beat better.
When are they being paid? It would be my question. Just when they're all sort of waiting for them as they get off the beta truck at the end of the day, they'll be just watch where the people being paid go and follow them and say, "Where's mine?"
I'll have one of them. Yeah, exactly.
Well, something's occurred to me, which is maybe there's a reason he's not being paid. Maybe he's genuinely a dreadful beta, and they're sort of gently trying to edge him out by not paying him. I'm sure that's not true. There's no way that anybody listening to this podcast could be a bad beta.
No.
Well, what tips would you give a really bad beta right now then, George, to make sure that he wasn't... What are the things he's got to look out for to improve his beating game?
Surely George isn't the best person to ask this question.
I'm not sure you are either, Ollie, but...
Well, everyone starts out as a beta.
They do.
I beated for a bit.
I think the key... is he good at judging what a straight line looks like? When there needs to be a straight line, just check, is he in that straight line? I think, because if he's not, then that could be a reason he's not being paid. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just odd, isn't it? Surely they're not going, yeah, he's just not good enough, we won't pay him and see if he says anything. That can't be the case.
No,
Chris, I think you're right though. I think turning around and saying, "Well, I'm out. I'm leaving anyway, so I might as well ask. Where's my paycheck?"
Yeah,
but make sure the guns are the guns being asked for beaters' wages? I'm not seeing any of that, guys.
Yeah,
and then ask for it to be backdated.
Yeah. The other thing he could do is message in and be like, "Look, I don't mind. Actually, I'll stay anonymous, but I can name the shoot," and we could just put it out there, and some other beaters or guns might raise it for him.
Or crowdfund for Guns on Pegs podcast. We could crowdfund Napoleon's wage.
Yeah, this is a very good idea. We're looking for sort of £20 a week during the season max. I don't know how many. It's a small shoot. No, he doesn't need much. We're fine.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know if we've helped, but we tried.
We've discussed.
We've discussed a bunch of options of which Napoleon can choose one, I think. And
I think confrontation, whilst fearing of sounding terribly un-British, is the way forward here. It is. You need to say, well, this isn't fair. Where's my money?
Is that your motto in life? Confrontation is the way. No,
not always. If I'm behind the wheel, then yes, probably normally is the way. No, of course. Terribly good driver.
Yeah, just tell him to do that. Solved it, George.
Yeah, well, let's have an update, please, Napoleon.
Yes,
let us know.
Why did you call him Napoleon?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked, Chris. The whole thing made me... the whole thing made me think of a line from Animal Farm, which is that all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others.
He's really thought about it.
And Napoleon is one of the pigs in Animal Farm. It's the first time I've ever really gone like maximum intellectual.
Animal Farm, George Orwell, isn't it? Was it
correct?
Tolstoy?
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's Orwell.
Yeah, Orwell. Yeah. So yeah, that's why Napoleon is there.
Gosh, I'm glad I did ask, because you would have been seething that I didn't.
He would have just said it anyway, I think. Just in case you wanted this asked.
Yeah, like half an hour later.
Yeah. I'd have definitely given a small prize to anybody who'd emailed in having caught the reference. Right, moving on. Got an unpopular opinion, Chris?
Yeah, so this unpopular opinion comes from someone George has called Toto, and we'll get onto that in a bit. Toto says, guns have lost the ability to mark, and a lot don't even try. I understand how on big shoots, where there are hugely efficient picking up packs, that there isn't really a need, although I would still argue there is a duty. However, this nonchalance has now started to spread to the smaller farm shoots where I and my 2 spaniels ply our trade. With 2 semi-controllable dogs, I tend to both beat and then assist in the search and rescue after the drive. So on emerging from the beat, you generally get asked to take a look for a hard hit bird in that hedge over there. And then I always ask, where's your mark? How hard hit? And is it a cock or a hen? Now, I appreciate that in the thrill of the flush, you might not be able to give a what 3 words, or indeed might have even got confused over the sex, although this one still boggles me. But I would say that the last season, the overwhelming response was a pretty blank stare. I love working my dog, so I actually enjoy a good wild goose chase. But some of the marks I've had this season would need a fox pack to do any justice. One of the common defences for the smaller shoot is that it's a fun way to put free-range fodder on the table. If that's the case, then the ability to mark any wounded bird is surely a top priority, as is a follow-up shot, but that's another email. Good point.
Very good point.
Ollie, have you seen this? Are you sensing an attitudinal change here that we need to address?
To be quite honest with you, it's. I think it's not being taught to the guns, up and coming as youngsters, or even those learning at a later date. It seems to be one of those, because obviously, rightly so, we're so fixated on safety and that sort of thing, and etiquette to other guns. So, that seems to be the focus. And I think it's just one of those things that's missed out. It's particularly if you don't have your own dog and you see all the picker-uppers behind you. I think generally the reason is that what I've experienced is I've gone up to guns afterwards as a host and said, did you get a mark on that bird you hit? And he goes, well, half the time it's what bird? It's just, which wrong? That's you joke, but a lot of these guys don't even know they hit these birds, so let alone mark them. And it is a problem that's creeping in, it's not a good problem, because obviously as a community, we, particularly with wounded birds, we want to make sure they're found and dispatched as quickly as possible.
Not really one you can teach on a playground, is it?
It's just one of those things, exactly, but you joke, but it is. It's one of those things that people coming up from, or graduating, I don't say graduating, but, moving on from clays or as well as clays, it's just not something you think to teach them. It's just another one of those things which comes with experience and comes with being told.
And having a good mentor as well, right? Having a good mentor to tell you, I still think that, the years that I spent shooting with my dad standing with me are invaluable, because that's how those sort of messages get in. And I think particularly if you're relatively new to game shooting, you might not necessarily know what to look for in a prick to tell when you've pricked a bird. Obviously knowing when you've knocked one out the sky, it's a pretty binary thing, hit or miss. But I think sometimes there are little telltale signs that an experienced gun will know to look for, to say, actually, that bird has been hit, but it hasn't come down. And certainly when we have new guns shooting with us here at home, I make a point of trying to keep an eye, when I'm not shooting myself, or if I'm out of the action a bit, I'll try and keep an eye on the rest of the line, so that I can go to someone and say, you hit that cockbird and it's set its wings and it's gone back that way. This being said, I do also have a reputation for sending pickers up on a bit of a wild goose chase as well, because I say things like, I think I might have hit that one.
I wasn't going to say it.
I might have hit that one, but I'm not sure. Could you just go and have a look?
Yeah, you just hoped you hit that one, and the poor person bears the brunt of your desire to have one in the bag. I think that the point you make, George, about someone bringing, like when you're young, if you're lucky enough to have started shooting when you're really young, and a lot of people have, like a huge number, you've got that mentor. I think that obviously that person's duty is to these sorts of things, isn't it? Like a bunch of things, etiquette, safety, all that sort of stuff. This comes in that category. However, as shooting's grown, there's a lot of people getting into shooting at a later date when it's a bit sometimes awkward to have a sort of 50-year-old man have someone else stand on the peg with him that kind of talks to him like he's his dad. I think that's definitely an issue. So I think for those sorts of people,
it's a pride thing for these guys, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then you don't want to sort of, I don't know, do people feel like they don't want to be the last one back to the gun bus or something, and they're like looking for ages? My dad used to spend forever looking for birds just making sure that every single last one was picked. And people would sort of, some people would be like, oh, we're still waiting for him. But then like there'd always be someone who'd shut that person down and be like, no, he's doing the absolute right thing of making sure that every single one picked. I think we almost need to bring that back, which is like last one back to the gun bus is almost like the coolest because he's really taking the time.
Yeah, you're right. A great friend of mine, he's, in my syndicate, he's works a lab and two cockers, and he'll pick his own birds, and then if you see, he'll literally go around all the other guys. Like you say, maybe they want to be first back to the gun bus or first to 11s.
Yeah.
But did you have any birds? And he'll go and look for those birds, and he'll sometimes come back 20 minutes, 25 minutes later. But that's for him. And as rightly so, and as it is for a lot of us, and should be, it's the main part of the day is finding the quarry that's been slipped through the net by the pickers up, etc.
And obviously, we're all aiming for clean kills all of the time. And I wonder if that means that there's sometimes an element of embarrassment about saying I've hit that and not killed it outright. But I think if that is the case, you have to remember that the pickers up are there for a reason. They want to be there for the most part. And sure, picking up shot game and finding it in cover and so on is a satisfying thing. But I'll bet if you ask any picker up, it's the pricked bird that's gone miles back and they've spent 25 minutes looking for, and they've eventually found it tucked up in some brambles or something that that's their bathtub bird. So I don't think anybody should be embarrassed about saying to a picker up, I think I've hit that, and this is where it's gone back. But the trouble with the marking element, which is the other aspect of this, is if your focus is the next bird, which I think can happen quite easily, particularly on a busy drive.
But it can't be.
That's where you get the failure to mark.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's the starting point. It can't be. And even on a bigger day, if you prick one and you've hit it hard, you cannot be looking forward and pulling the trigger until you've spotted where that thing's landed, because the picker up's going to want to know. I think this is a cultural shift. We've got to, if people are feeling this way or this is starting to happen, we've got to nip it in the bud, because
one of the biggest things that frustrates me as well is when you see a gun hit the bird with the first barrel, and plenty of time to take that second shot, and it's perhaps not, do you know what I mean? When you hit the bird hard and it's coming down, but it's sort of a diagonal trajectory, sort of locking its very last bit of its wings and makes the hedge. I was like, I could have had another shot. And I'm sorry, I do actually. I turn around to the guns. I'm like, you have two barrels for a reason, and it's the case. Or worse, they just break the gun, or they look for the next bird. And it's like, there could have been a second shot there.
As Toto said in the last line, he said, as is a follow-up shot, but that's another email. And so, go on, Toto, send it in. I agree with you, the route that Ollie's going down. So what do we think? I mean, so this, I'm sensing this is not an, I see his questions actually, is this an unpopular opinion? That this is happening is a tricky one to answer. But do we agree with what he's saying? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is the onus on host? Is the onus on host to turn around and say in the beginning of the day, at the briefing, please pick up your empty cartridges, please mark your birds? Because I'm guilty of not saying that, and now I've had this conversation with you guys, and thank you, Toto. I probably will say, please mark your birds. What's marking a bird?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, exactly.
This is an entirely separate conversation, but I do sometimes think that the shoot briefing is a bit like the safety briefing on an airplane, which is if you've been on enough shoot days, you're like, yeah, don't shoot the beaters. I get it, fine. Like, come on, let's get cracking. And that we do better to pay more attention in those situations. It's like the riding.
I've got an idea.
Well, just all the famous kind of diva-ish things that rock bands put in their rider, only blue M&Ms or whatever. The reason they're doing that is to make sure that the tech guy, that everybody's reading their stuff, that they're doing it properly. So they put in something very specific and pointless to make sure that they can be confident that the lighting rig's not going to fall in their head halfway through the set. Yeah. And it's the same thing. Like, I just wonder if shoot captains shouldn't start putting like I don't know, a quiz question halfway through the briefing and offering a prize for the end so that they know for sure that people are paying attention.
Well, I was thinking, the podcast garters, like they become sort of in demand, a little, like, and a really nice thing to have. What if shoots just had like tie, badge, cap, garters, whatever, one of those things, and they said, right, at the end of today, in the briefing, and this will get people listening. At the end of today, there's going to be a prize given by the pickers up for the gun of the day, and pickers up decide. And they'll chat amongst themselves, and one gun's going to get the coveted shoot tie or garters or whatever, and then that starts over a period of time. And the pickers up basically will say, "Yeah, this gun, he was supremely helpful. He shot well. He did this. He marked all his birds. He helped us back to the whatever, And then those are sorts of reasons, not just he shot the longest bird, which is boring, but that sort of thing would then start people going, "Yeah, that's what's cool."
Yeah, like the longest retrieve award.
But the point being, the pickers up decide.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a good idea. That's not a bad idea at all. It adds another element to the day as well.
Everyone loves a bit of gamification, don't they? Bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do a one of the things, going back to George's point about dropping in the blue M&M in the briefing, is that we have a it's a standard sort of set of briefing, and then we have a mobile phone rule where you're not allowed to use your mobile phone during the day, and if you're caught using your mobile phone, your hat will be filled with mud at the end of the day, thrown up in the air and ceremoniously shot. And people take this very seriously. I mean, firstly, it improves the day no end, because you're on a day shooting. If you need to work, you can do it at 11s or lunchtime. But the point is, you're here to enjoy the day. You're here to be looked after by us. So it takes away that element of, you've seen people on the peg, birds start coming, they're just, on the phone. So it completely removes that. And if they are caught that, then you'd be amazed how quickly their neighbouring gun, like, he's on his mobile, hats. With it, and the hat then goes into the sweepstakes. So it all it's just, like you said, a bit of fun.
I really like the idea of your shoot lodge having a display of hat trophies.
Shot hats.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, better, what we've got is we've got a ladies' pink Royal Ascot hat that if your hat is shot in the morning, you have to wear that in the afternoon.
Very
which
nice.
Is, it's one of those silly things.
That's a quick way to make sure partridges avoid you, isn't it?
Well, there we are. Exactly.
That's good. That links into the discussion about mobiles that we had in one of the previous pods with, was it Tarquin or George Ponsonby or someone?
Yeah, I can't remember. It was recently. Yeah.
I was sort of getting quite outspoken, suggesting that the phone be shot, but I actually much prefer your suggestion, Ollie. I think it's slightly more palatable, just shooting someone's hat.
It goes. I think they used back in the day when phones were far less valuable. Dad, I think, did have that as a second strike. They take the SIM, when you could just take the SIM card out and put it in another phone. That would just so your brick would be thrown up in the air or something. But now, obviously, phones are whatever they are. I think perhaps that would ensure that they wouldn't come back next year if you start shooting their mobile phones,
their prized possessions.
Yeah. I think you need one of those old school clay traps, because a flat cap filled with mud, I reckon you could get some distance on that with a clay trap.
Oh yeah, but I mean, even just from behind the gun's hand, and you'd be amazed how many guys come back the next year proudly still wearing the hat with great big holes in it and all sorts. But I guess it's got a story behind it. So we've had guys that have come back and then had the hat shot again the next year, and by which point it's just like in pieces. Like, you can't wear that anymore.
Oh, very good.
Right, so Napoleon and Toto and, of course, Ollie are now members of the most noble order of the Garters and will soon be in receipt of their very own set of the highly exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast Shooting Sock Garters. If you too have got a shooting confession, quandary or query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion, or if you'd like to tell us about a forgotten drive and you would like a set of Garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com. And just quickly on the forgotten drives, we have had a submission, so keep an ear out to the next episode for that. What are you trying to show me on the screen there, Chris?
I've got to give a shout out to Mr. Dogs on Pegs.
Oh, yes. Speaking of things that will keep the partridges away.
Yeah. So we received a letter from Dogs on Pegs, who's on Instagram. And he's had a couple of mentions in the pod over his time. He was on the live episode, our 50th Not Out episode. He was particularly drunk. But anyway, basically, George and I have received and Frank and Digby in the office, actually, this ridiculously garish pink tie, which is about as garish as the garters. So it's getting a bit OTT now.
Only real men can wear pink.
Yes, but it's getting, it's starting to not look great. So Sheldon has sent this in. He's actually said where you can get it as well. So he's basically making it open for others if they want to sort of go that extra level to match their garters. If you go to Frederick Thomas, Google it, knitted silk tie in bright hot pink.
Knitted.
Yeah.
It's knitted, and it's one of those ones that's straight at the end and narrow.
Oh, no, not them. Sorry, Sheldon, can't get on board with that one.
It's pink already, like to another level pink. It's not just like a nice little sort of weddingy pink. It's garish pink. Anyway, It's lovely. I'm going to wear it. I'm looking forward to it. Ties are coming back on sim days, George.
Are they
are now, anyway.
According to whom?
According to me and my pink tie.
Pink tie. Yeah, the Clays won't be scared of the tie, so it's the only time he can wear it.
Exactly. So, no, thank you, Sheldon.
Yes, thank you, Sheldon. Thank you very much. I will wear mine with pride. You know me.
Something else come back before we get off fashion is Crocs. Yes, they're making a storming return.
No, this is only in Cornwall. I've been checking this out because Digby raised this, and I swear that it's not got out of Cornwall.
Are we saying Crocs on shoot days?
Yeah, no, well, I wear. You must have seen Crocs at morning coffee.
No,
you've never seen Crocs at morning coffee?
No, I don't think I have.
All the time.
Wow.
Well, you should be considering it because it's.
Okay, I understand they're comfortable, but it's like someone going to the supermarket in their dressing gown
or Crocs.
Equally unacceptable.
Dressing gown and Crocs.
So I've got real tree camo Crocs.
Yeah, I've seen these,
which are pretty garish. I think you could possibly go along the pink because, well, other than the fact you've got invisible feet, they're multi-purpose.
If there's people of game shootings yesteryear who are turning in their graves at the concept of people going to the morning briefing in Crocs, honestly, like when I first started shooting, you had to shave, you had to wear a tie, you'd sent away if you hadn't done either of those. The idea of Crocs, honestly.
Well, you weren't allowed beards.
No
beards.
You wouldn't. You literally wouldn't be able to shoot at this shoot. Nor would you, George. Times are changing. Does that mean that Crocs are coming back? Open question. Hopefully not.
Email us pod@gunsonpegs.com with your Crocs views.
Subject, Crocs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, Ollie, tell us a bit about Lanhydrock then.
So, we've own, run or manage about 2,500 acres. The family gave the house, parkland, and a fair amount of woodland to the National Trust in the 1950s. As with all these big houses, it was becoming extraordinarily expensive to look after. So that was the best course of action. So the trust now run the house, but we kept a significant amount of the land, which is now what we now run as the estate. So yeah, it's a multifaceted sort of business, I'd say. You've got a farming operation, obviously property as well, and then the shoot, which my grandfather sort of rekindled from the ashes of what it was back in the good old days of shooting, I suppose, in the sort of early 20th century. And he rekindled it to a sort of a small farm shoot, and then my dad took it over in the late 90s and has built it into even though I say so myself, one of the finest shoots in the region. So but that's his hard work, and I've only really got involved with it in the last 4 or 5 years. And we've had a keeper who's been with us since he was 18. So initially started working on the farms here, and then Dad took him on as a head keeper, and we've just this year taken on his daughter as an underkeeper. So keeping it in the family there. So that's the brief overview of sort of.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's very family run.
That's epic that you've taken on his daughter as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want me to mention any names, but yeah, she's undoubtedly as hardworking as he is, and I think it'd be quite cool in a few years to have a female head keeper as well. So,
so my first question: how's the relationship with National Trust? Because I know of at least 2 shoot estates that have National Trust links, and both are not going very well.
we have a very, very good relationship with National Trust for the most part. We are actually their tenants as well in the parklands. So we farm. We put a lot of our Hereford into the parkland there. Being honest, there was a bit of friction between myself and them with the whole Love Island thing, as you can probably imagine. The Lanhydrock State Company being us, and they started calling themselves Lanhydrock Estate a few years ago. Before that, they were just National Trust Lanhydrock. So they sort of blur the lines between us and them. So when obviously there's any drama with my family and our, I guess you could call Love Island a bit of drama, they obviously straight away, the press didn't do any kind of research. They just Googled me, Googled my name, and then they made the link to the house. And so the trust was sort of dragged into it slightly. I mean, they had a few very nasty death threats left on their voicemails in the house. So that obviously being picked up by volunteers in the house wasn't very nice. But I mean, none of this is my fault. This is all completely out of my hands. So I think that caused a bit of friction. But for the most part, we have a very good relationship with them, considering. Hoping to build on that as I move forward and start to take over more of a leading role.
So you mentioned that you're kind of taking on more of a role with the shoot, and I thought that this was probably a subject that applies to quite a lot of owned and operated shoots, where there's sort of one generation taking over from the next, and you've already alluded to it as well in terms of taking on the head keeper's daughter as an underkeeper. So that transition can either go smoothly or it can go not smoothly, I guess is what I'm driving at. How's it going with you and your dad?
I'll be the first to admit that Dad will never retire. This is his life, and it's his life's work as well. So he'll never, unless he figures out how to buy a boat and sail around the Caribbean, he'll never truly retire, I don't think. And I've accepted that. So, but I wouldn't want him to retire because every time I have an idea or he has an idea, we'll bounce it off each other. Whether that's shouting at each other, bouncing off each other, or just generally, like as mates, just shooting the SH1T. So I think it is actually so far been a very positive and exactly as I'd want it. Treating my dad as one of my best mates, as well as obviously my boss. Any ideas he has, any ideas I have, we run with them together. So, in answer to your question, yeah, it's been going great so far.
That's quite cool. It's really enjoyable when you can do. Obviously, like my dad and I have that really close relationship. Similar, although he's not involved in the business on a daily basis anymore. Like I always just ring him for ideas and stuff, and like just doing that together, and then like seeing the results of it.
Yeah,
you two,
hugely.
it must mean you got a pretty awesome relationship.
Yeah, I mean most of the time.
You're ditto.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's the responsibility of your estate it's a really interesting one because of this National Trust link as well. It must make it that much harder. Like, do you find that is there a little bit more sort of red tape, or you've got to sign things off with them? You talk about these ideas with your dad, and then are you finding that it's just a little bit more complicated than it otherwise be?
Well, fundamentally, we own the vast majority of the land we operate on. So there's only a small amount that is actually leased from us to the trust on a long lease. And then the trust, we donated the land and the house to the trust that they now own. So there's not so much a grey area in that sense. The grey area sort of comes when it's it's as the trust move on with their business, and certain things that there's been friction on when they built a big cycle hub in the woods around Lanhydrock, which for the most part didn't go down well with the local community, because that was seen as anti-conservation. Ripping out loads of trees and putting loads of cycle trails in could be argued that perhaps that's not what the trust stands for in terms of preserving and maintaining areas of natural beauty. And I think that was sort of reciprocated with myself, in the fact that that's the areas of friction that tend to appear. But on the most part, we do actually have quite a good relationship with them. Like I said, we're their tenants on the parkland, so we farm the parkland for them, and then most of the grassland around their areas. But like I said, they firmly own the land that the family donated them. And we firmly own the land that we kept. So, yeah, it's quite clear cut in that sense.
And Ollie, tell me, how long has your family been at Lanhydrock? Do you know? Is it generation upon generation upon generation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the family tree goes back to Richard Roberts, who's late 1500s, early 1600s. So that's family tree of mum and dad's house goes back that far. And that was a sort of start of the Cornish. I mean, Dad speaks about the estate at its peak, but being a lot of it being in Ireland as well. I'm not really sure the exact link there, but there are times, I think, when the estate was about 280,000 acres. So a serious wedge of land, of a lot of Cornwall, a lot of Devon, but obviously, like all big estates, or vast majority, inheritance was chipped away and slowly but surely shrunk down to being donated in the 50s, when there was really no other option financially. So yeah, it's been around for a while.
So I guess that makes the bit that you do still own even more precious, right? And there's a different kind of responsibility as well that comes with that. I mean, I remember my dad saying to me, and we don't have anything like the same quantity of land, but I remember my dad saying to me when I was quite small that he didn't really think of it as land ownership, more as like custodianship, that almost we belong to the land rather than the land belong to us, which I always thought was a really, really nice way of looking at it. And I guess that with that, we've been here 100 years. If you've been there several hundred years, that sense of place and responsibility to that place must be even stronger.
Well, I call it a stewardship. It's you're stewarding the land for the next generation. Yes, you may own the land and so on and so forth. But for me, and I know my dad feels this way as well. It's not necessarily a fear, but I suppose it is a fear. You don't want to be the generation that drops the torch. You don't want to be, that. And I'll openly say it now. The generation that when the house was donated to the trust, they fundamentally dropped the torch for no fault of their own. I'm sure, but because it was just too expensive to run, and that was the only outcome that was seen at the time. But so, like you say, what's remaining is so important to us as a family. We have to protect it in whatever ways we can, and always looking for the next way to create income and create ways to look after it for the next generation.
And I guess so that leads me nicely on to the next question, which is nothing stands still. Whether it's in farming or in the shooting world. So have you got any plans for the shoot? How do you see that developing over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
I'm not really sure if I should say this. Well, I mean, shooting, I think, is unfortunately on the clock. I think the way we have it at the moment is as good as it's going to be, in terms of, we have a lot of freedom in what we can and can't do as a community. And I think, unfortunately, our freedoms are going to be more and more restricted as we move forwards, and that will affect shoots and the state's abilities to make shooting financially viable. So we have to look to replace any income that was created from shooting with other, preferably, similar activities which can utilize the land in the same managed way as that shooting does. And I think for me, one of the things I'm looking at doing is, like a lot of other states have already done, is simulated days. It seems a very clever way to utilize your facilities as a shoot. Essentially the only thing that's missing is the game. Everything else is the same. You've got your hospitality. I suppose that you don't unfortunately have the beaters and the picker-uppers, so they'll lose that community sense, and that will sort of disappear, which is a hidden negative that a lot of people don't understand. But from the guns perspective, you're stood there with a loader or whatever, and you're shooting similar sort of. I wouldn't want to say a bird as a target, but you obviously clay as a target that are coming over. So that's what I see ourselves doing over the next couple of years is developing that side of the business. But yeah, I think unfortunately, like I say, shooting is changing and is perhaps not always for the best.
I completely agree with you that shooting is going to change, and I also really agree with your comment that right now essentially it's sort of unregulated. You got that freedom, I think was the word you mentioned. I'm not sure I agree necessarily it's on the clock, but I think that's a different debate. But I think we're going to have to be a lot more focused on what it delivers, and it actually almost links back to that sort of cycle park type thing you mentioned with the National Trust. It's about land use, it's about inputs, outputs, all the rest of it, and I think there's so few shoots that actually make a surplus that without the desire of the landowner or the land manager, whoever it may be, to actually lay on that shoot in the first place, by and large, shooting really wouldn't exist. It's not a money-making scheme, and very few that we find in our world where they're actually profit-making.
Of course,
when you've boiled it all down. But I think it is going to change, and I think that sort of each estate will be different. And what you end up doing on your ground will be up to you. But you'll keep people coming back, I'm sure, because there's a massive sense of place, and you've got that awesome countryside and create the atmosphere when you get there. And if you shoot a few less birds, or you do it in a different way, or some sim days as well, probably not quite the same thing to a lot of people, but it's going to be awesome to see what people do. And I also think it's a bit of an opportunity, and I think it's something we've just got to have to stand up to and realize it's going to happen and do our best.
Well, Dad and I, we said, time and time again, we don't shoot. We don't shoot on our ground to make money. And in fact, I don't think in the last 10 years, I think we've probably made profit once. The only reason we shoot at home is to be able to show off the work that our gamekeepers do, that we do, that everybody who inputs into that estate has done. It's a fantastic way to show, people coming from all over the country, really, our little part of Cornwall, which without the shooting, there's valleys that well, I do stalking, so it's different. But Dad, obviously, he admits it. It gives him a chance to walk the estate properly. Without it, he said probably wouldn't go down into that valley. Why would I go down there? It's just it's an interesting dilemma. But it's being brutally honest, we very, very rarely make money, and that's not the reason we do it. So
it's a really interesting subject matter, this whole the future of shooting, and it leads me on to a thing that I did want to ask you about, which is so much of it comes down to public perception, and I think that you, more than anybody else I can think of, have experienced the full laser-like glare of the media spotlight where it applies to shooting. You've already alluded to it a couple of times. You had, a petition set up to get you off the program. You've had social media abuse. You've had articles in the newspapers about you. I don't want to ask what's it like. I want to how did you deal with all of that at the time? How do you It's got to be an incredibly intense experience. How do you cope with it in the full glare of that spotlight?
Well, by all means, ask what it's like, and I'll tell you. It's not very nice. Put it that way. waking up, even still, I wake up. I mean, I woke up today with a message, just woke up to a request on Instagram saying, I hope you get run over by a bus today, you horrible, very rude word. So it's still there and it still happens. But in answer to your question, I had a very, very good family around me, very good group of friends. One of my best mates was actually running my Instagram account when I was out there. And he was an absolute saint. He literally put up with, obviously, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages a day, just people being like, kill yourself, I'm going to kill you, I know where you live, I'll kill you in the next 12 months. Then we're getting these obviously the trust, we're getting these voicemails as well, which is horrible for the house staff. I mean, they had nothing to do with it, but it was a frenzy that was completely and totally stirred up by the newspapers, and it was completely sensationalist in terms of half the animals in the actual photos I didn't even shoot. So that's the crazy thing about it. Obviously, I have shot buffalo and I have shot, I hold my hands up because I sell buffalo hunts. But the thing is, if they'd actually done the research and looked at the Instagram post they pulled it from in the first place, they would have realised that I hadn't shot the animal in question.
Did any of this make you change anything about your habits and the way that you post or anything like that? Did it actually have any actual impact other than the difficult nature of receiving?
Yes, it did.
Like that?
It did. It definitely made me, obviously getting all these messages and being very public where I lived. It did make me think twice about what I did. I mean, I had a pretty horrible experience in Truro, actually, on a night out. I was this was about 4 weeks after the show, and first time going out on a night out, and I just went for a few beers with some mates, and I thought no one would recognise me and all this, and obviously I didn't really appreciate how much of a big deal Love Island was at the time, I suppose, especially someone from Cornwall, being obviously on it and going back to Cornwall. And I went into this restaurant in Truro, and I went in through the doors, and honestly, it was like, that Wild West moment when the doors just swing open and everyone just goes silent. There was a full restaurant. It must have been about 100 people in the restaurant, and everyone just looked and went silent. And I was like, okay, these people recognise me, and it was pretty. And I sort of sat down, and everyone sort of went back to their thing, and then people coming over asked me for photographs and all this, and I was like, this is weird. I really didn't like it, so I thought, right, we'll just go to my mate's restaurant and we'll sort of do a lock-in. So we had a few beers at his, and then we went to the bar next door, and that's when it got completely out of control. And obviously, because alcohol was involved, and people were coming up to me like, "Why you shoot animals?" I was obviously trying to have the same conversation with about 400 different people. So then I left, and these two blokes clocked me, and they just, they probably went for. We had a full on went for me, and I just basically, I don't know, there was at one point there was about 6 of them all trying to. So I just ran, literally just ran. Essentially, for what I was concerned at the time, I literally ran for my life back to my mate's house across the whole of Truro. And that was the only time that I ever felt like I was actually in danger. And unfortunately made me change my routine, because I didn't want to go back out for the next 6 months, because I didn't want to put myself in that situation again. So I'd lost all my mates, and I was just with these random blokes who wanted to do damage. And obviously, I don't. As shooters, you feel like you can't defend yourself in that situation, because if you turn around and smack him one when he smacks you and you knock him out and he hits his head or something and the police arrest you, it's your gun's gone. Yeah. So I can't. I almost feel like I can't. So I'm completely stuck between a rock and a hard place. That all these guys want to beat me up, but I can't. I feel like I can't respond.
It's so weird. It's just not obviously like we just would have no association with or ever having this, and just the fact that people can be like that, just absolutely mental.
And I have another one. There was another incident in Bournemouth Sevens, but that was just, I think, just a guy just took a dislike to me because he recognised me from a TV show and belted me in the back head with a bottle. So that was pretty exciting.
Oh my god,
gosh! But it didn't break my skin or anything. I just obviously have a pretty thick skull, So straight around, I was like, "Did you just smash a bottle over my head?" And he was like, "And what, mate?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm running away from this guy."
Goodness me!
So yeah, it's been pretty wild couple of experiences, I guess, like that. But touch wood, nothing two major happens, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, would you? Is there? I don't know. Like, it's so awful. Like, you shouldn't have to be like this. Obviously, just the fact that you go shooting and stuff. Obviously, we know that people are against it, but would it? If you could go back and sort of start that whole episode again, would you have still done what you did? Because there should be nothing to stop you doing that. There's nothing wrong, and you shouldn't feel that way. But or does the output of it make you have an element of regret?
Hey, listen. I mean, I wouldn't. Let's be real for a second. I probably wouldn't be talking to you guys today if it wasn't for that whole thing, would I? Let's put it like that. I mean, it might have been. You might have decided to randomly interview a small shoot owner in Cornwall, but I don't regret any of it really, because it's the opportunities.
That's good to hear.
The opportunities it's brought me has been great. I've met so many amazing people in the industry and outside of the industry, and when people actually, particularly when it comes to Africa and conservation hunting and so-called trophy hunting, when you actually sit somebody down, explain to them, they may be anti. When you sit them down, it's like, can you just give me 5 minutes to explain to you my side of the situation, and then you can cast your aspersions again. And 95% of the time, when I've sat them down and had the conversation, explained all the I call them secondary and tertiary benefits. Obviously, your primary benefits is your hunter and he gets the trophy, etc. But then the secondary benefits goes to the community, etc., etc. As we all know so well, they actually go, do you know what? No one's ever explained to me that. I was like, funny that, because you've only ever read The Sun. And they just say, big, rich, white man shoots out lion. That's the end of it. He's sick. So he lives here. And that is the be all and end all of the article. There's no, but his money was, donated to hundreds of thousands of dollars went to the local community and stops poaching in the area and all sorts, and builds schools and feeds the community and and prevents all sorts. So
yeah, what's almost ironic about that is that the big game hunting in Africa argument is almost one of the easiest to make or defend, at least, than all of them. Yet it's the one that almost gets the most anti-publicity.
Yeah, it's Disneyfying is what I call it. It's sensationalist. It's Disneyfying. It's people just you see obviously a buffalo and you see your various animals, and obviously some are more. If you look at the reaction, irrespective of how endangered they are or anything, there are some which are just trigger more people. For example, the one that triggered a lot of people for me was the warthog, and there are millions of warthog in Africa, millions of them. But because people have watched The Lion King, and hang on, that's Pumbaa. It was, that was one of their big primary photos they pushed. Not the eland, which is the biggest antelope in Africa, because no one knows what an eland is. There's no Ellie the eland, is there? It's Pumbaa, and hang on, he shot Pumbaa. So that's the reason that African it's because it's so badly portrayed in the press, and I do think that, I'll admit it, social media has had a really negative impact on rifle hunting as a whole, because you shoot your animal, and the first thing that, rightly so, we're all guilty of it, I suppose. The first thing that a lot of people want to do, and it's almost part of the experience now, is they straight away they get their phone out and they're like, yeah, they're going to get a photo, and it's almost like that's what previously was your cape and head mount on the wall. A lot of people they'll just be like, no, I've got my photo, that's all, I'm good. I will stick that on a frame, and of course they'll post it on their social media, and in the heat of the moment you're over the top of the animal and you're grinning, and if you take all of your opinions away from it and you look at the face value of what that photo is to someone who doesn't like shooting, is it's usually a relatively wealthy person stood over as far as they're concerned, Lion King animal with a great big grin on his face, and they're like, he's a sicko, and I hate him, and so should everybody else. And that's
it's not a great output of the situation, is it, though? That's the thing. Yeah. I've always thought those photos, like, they definitely don't tell the story of what happened prior or what's going to happen after. If anything, we should just stop doing that and just accept that it's gone, because it's like the amount of flack for one tiny aspect is just not worth it.
Agreed.
But I know what you mean. Like, it's a shame we shouldn't have to stop doing anything because we're not in the wrong type thing. But at the same time, give and take. It's
common sense.
An easy win, isn't it?
Common sense.
Yeah.
I must admit, I learned a lot of common sense through this experience, and it's, whilst I still do post photos of that nature, I make sure that they're very, very the caption is extremely self-explanatory. It's we took this animal because of X, Y, and Z. This is where the meat goes. This is what happens to the various parts, and so it gives those antis and your in particular the media less ammunition to start sensationalist riots. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's completely understandable why people would want that photo, though, right? And you've hunted in Africa a fair bit, and I'm guessing I don't think neither Chris or I have pulled the trigger in Africa. I'm guessing it feels a bit different to being out, say, stalking a roebuck in Cornwall or something. It's just a completely different experience. So I can understand why people might want that photo for their memories. How does it compare to being in this country doing something that's ostensibly quite similar?
The first thing is obviously, antelope and plains game, once you've done it a couple of times, there's not that much difference. I'd be quite honest, between going up and stalking a deer in various different climates and things. It's just a little bit warmer or a little bit rockier, or a little bit further, a little bit different trees. But what really changes the dynamic in Africa, and which is what a lot of people, it'd be fair to say, if they can, I suppose, lucky enough to be given an opportunity to do it, is the dangerous game aspect. When you start bringing buffalo into the situation, which are deadly, quite simply. If you come face to face with a buffalo without a gun, with a lone angry buffalo, particularly if he's wounded, you're in a world of pain, literally. So that's where it completely switches on its head, because if you hunt buffalo enough, you will end up shooting one charging, and that's, in my opinion, the pinnacle of hunting. Open sights, double rifle or something like that. You've got clients' buffaloes got up and come at you, and I mean, Paul Childley had a very good. If you want to watch
that's an amazing video.
Yeah. I mean, he keeps on winding up David, saying, "I saved your life. I saved your life." But for example, that goes to the backstory. That had was caught in a snare and had been wrapped around. It had a snare wrapped around its leg or neck or something for months, and that's why that was so angry. And it came at them through dense thicket. Poor misses, someone's getting gored, and that's what for me. That's what switches it on to. It's just there's a deer in a field, or it's an antelope in a field, and you're harvesting the meat to, if I miss, I die, or my client dies, or vice versa. So that changes it. That's but also it's you don't always have to pull the trigger. So it's with elephants particularly, they're very easy to control just by using your voice, using your body language. A rifle is very, very rarely required for a grumpy elephant. You normally send them on their way with some stern words. But generally, each animal is different in the way it reacts, and it's a thing that you can constantly learn. And as you go to a hunt, you experience something new, and then they say, "Oh, but if you do this with this animal," so that gets people coming back. So it's that opportunity with a dangerous game. I think that it is really what I call the next level in terms of a hunting experience.
I have a feeling you might be heading there in Desert Island Shooting.
You may be right.
Well, yeah, so one last day, money's no object, the laws of physics don't matter, time travel is possible, you can do whatever you want, with whoever you want, wherever you want. Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you taking with you?
And you're allowed to use the Guns on Pegs private jet as well.
Okay, brilliant.
Special occasion.
Does it, because the laws of physics don't cancel? Because is it like a hypersonic jet? Can it go ultra fast to my destination?
Yeah, no one else has one.
Okay, brilliant. So it's like a rocket, basically. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. So Elon's been trying for years to recreate what we've had since the start of this podcast.
Knew it. knew that was the link. Right. So it would start, I suppose. I think I'd have a couple of drives at home. So I'd have my two. We'd save the drives all year and not shoot anything till just drive everything over, my mates or my syndicate over a couple big drives, loaders, whole 9 yards, and then we get in the Guns on Pegs hypersonic jet and fly to Mozambique. We'd land straight on the Sophia runway, which is really only reserved for helicopters and small planes. But because the hypersonic jet defies the laws of physics, we can slow down and not crash.
Yeah.
And then basically, this is where I sort of have been before with the buffalo and stuff. And it is as close to old Africa as you can get in terms of it is 2.8 million acres.
Wow.
Yeah, it's massive.
How big is that?
I think it's like
1 million acres.
I think it's like the same size as Cornwall and Devon.
Yeah, I think Cornwall's 1 million acres. Isn't it?
It's vast. It's basically all around the Zambezi Delta. So the Zambezi River runs through the middle, and you're going down. You go down that. One thing I still haven't hunted yet, and mainly because I'm terrified of them. I've been on hunts with people shooting them, but I've never had a chance to pull my trigger myself. Is crocodile, and we've been down into the Zambezi, and we've asked the locals and sort of translated with my trackers, and so grande crocodile, and they say, well, yes, there's one here in this pool, and last week he ate someone's dog. I'm like, this pool right here, and like, yes. I'm like, well, why is there 25 children playing in this pool as we speak? And then the tracker turns around and goes, oh no, boss, they believe in destiny, so only the crocodile will take them if it is their time to be taken. And I'm like, but that's the way they think.
That's parenting, isn't it?
But some of these kids had never seen a white person before, so they thought I was a ghost. So they got down there, and then they were terrified of me because they'd never seen a white man before. So they were running away, screaming and crying. And I was like, what have I done wrong? And they were like, oh no, boss, I think you're a ghost. Yeah, it's proper wild. And then you go down there and you float about in this massive river. And also because of the horrible civil wars they've had there, when they were having the terrible genocides, they were dumping the bodies into the Zambezi. So the crocodiles got a taste of human flesh. So these crocodiles now actively hunt human beings because they're so old. A crocodile can be well over 100 years old. That's what they lived off for many, many occasions. So they now actively hunt humans. So, you fall in the water, there's a good chance you'll be eaten by a crocodile. So I tend to avoid that sort of part of the area. But yeah, and then you've got the swamps. And it's just, I just basically go around there with a 375 double rifle and
see what happens. Goodness me.
Exactly. And then all the locals get fed at the same time. So win-win. And then what happens at the end? Is that the end? Do I just die?
Well, no.
You said it's the last day shooting.
Yeah, it's your last day shooting, not your last day living.
Okay, so
you can do both. Maybe you feel the need to do both. I don't know. Like if it's last day shooting.
Well, that's the end. That's me. Sign out. Yeah. Then I just jump in the Zambezi. Bye, guys.
Go swimming with crocodiles and see how you get on. Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds good. Ish.
Well,
like most of it, apart from the last bit.
Yeah, apart from the last bit, but that's the deal. So, no, but yeah, it's just one of the coolest places I've ever been. It's just very relaxed. It's you're properly off the beaten track. You've got to get a little tiny flight to get in, or of course the Guns on Pegs hypersonic jet. Yeah, it's just amazing. So that would be where I'd finish my career.
I'd have to go on the list. We've not done it, either of us, have we, George?
No.
Let's sort it out.
The problem with these podcasts, Ollie, is that we end up with a lot of things we need to sort out.
That is.
And not enough money to address the problem. But yeah, it's really enjoyable listening to the various different stories. And yeah, exactly.
Well, but when we're out there recording a podcast, we can look back on this and say, yeah, that was one of the things you ticked off the list.
George is all up for traveling to foreign destinations and recording podcasts. He just likes doing it without telling me, though. So.
Well, it was a proof of concept. It was a proof of concept. We've proven that it works. Now we can do it more.
Fair enough. Cool. Count me in.
Mega.
Great. Well, Ollie, it's been great having you with us. Thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been fantastic.
No, really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, cheers, Ollie. Awesome.
Cheers, guys.
Right, as per usual, there is one final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas, sending us your unpopular opinions or sharing your forgotten drives, just drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episode, we will send you some garters. We will be back again in a couple of weeks with another special guest, but until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.